Imagine a ruler who walked into a land steeped in thousands of years of tradition and decided to, well, shake the very foundations of its society.
A huge undertaking.
Huge. Imagine a man who banned the practice of burning widows alive, who hunted down a secret, hereditary cult of highway murderers that had terrified travelers for centuries, and who fundamentally changed the language software of an entire subcontinent.
It's a good way to put it, language software.
Today, we aren't just reading dusty history books. We are decoding the blueprint of modern India through the eyes of a man who is often called the father of modern Western education in India, Lord William Bentinck. Welcome back to another deep dive. Today is going to be a heady hitter.
It really is. There's a lot to unpack with Bentinck.
For sure. But before we get into this really fascinating era of reform, I have a small, humble request. If you are finding value in these sessions, if these deep dives are helping you connect the dots for your exams or just, for your general knowledge, please hit that subscribe button on the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel.
It genuinely helps the channel grow.
It really does. It helps the algorithm find other learners like you, and honestly, it keeps us motivated to keep digging this deep. And if you are capable and want to support the mission even further, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon. It keeps this super useful content coming.
Creating these breakdowns takes a lot of time and resources.
It does. And a massive heartfelt shout out to all our current supporters. You guys are the fuel for this engine. We literally couldn't do this without you. Also, some quick reminders. Like the video, and please drop a valuable comment below. It really boosts engagement. We love reading your takeaways. Tell us what surprised you the most about this period.
It's always great to see what resonates with people.
Definitely. And for those asking about notes, yes, the free notes with practice previous year questions, or PYQs, are available on the public Telegram channel. The link is always in the description.
But if you're looking for the full package?
Exactly. If you want the premium experience access to all the videos in this series at once, plus the organized premium notes, which, include detailed breakdowns, extra PYQs, and even Model Lane's answers, you need to join the private Telegram library.
It's a game changer for serious aspirants.
It really is. Just DM us on the public channel to get the details. Okay, housekeeping done. Let's unpack this. Today, we are focusing on the Tamil Nadu Board Class 12th history, specifically Chapter 5. We are looking at the tenure of Lord William Bentinck, running from 1828 to 1835.
And it is arguably one of the most pivotal moments in the colonial timeline. I mean, if you zoom out and look at the governors general before him, figures like Lord Wellesley or the Marquess of Hastings, their eras were just defined by the sword.
Right. It was all about conquest.
Exactly. It was an era of conquest. It was about coloring the map red, fighting the Marathas, fighting the Mysore Sultan, the seizing territory. It was aggressive, it was expensive, and it was bloody. Bentinck represents a massive shift in, let's call it, the rhythm of history. He ushers in an era of consolidation and reform.
So, less sword fighting, more filing cabinets and legislation.
In a way, yes, but calling it filing cabinets might undersell the drama of it all. This wasn't just boring bureaucracy. This was social engineering on a massive scale.
That's a powerful term, social engineering.
It was. And Bentinck is often cited as the first Governor General of India. That's a specific title change we'll definitely get into later. But more importantly, he shifted the British role from being just a conquering power to being a governing power.
Okay, so what's our mission today? For the listener, what's the takeaway we're aiming for?
Our mission is to analyze his tenure specifically through the lens of UPSC preparation. We need to link these historical facts to potential examination questions, particularly when it comes to social reforms, those administrative changes, and that all-important Charter Act of 1833.
I love it. Let's start with the character study then, from soldier to reformer. Let's look at the man himself first, because context is everything. He was born in 1774, started as a soldier, and somehow became a member of Parliament at the age of 22. Shockingly young. I mean, at 22, I was still trying to figure out how to do my laundry.
It was a different time, certainly. The aristocracy had its perks, and if you had the right last name, doors opened very early. But what is most fascinating about his career arc, especially for our listeners who love a good comeback story, is that 1828 wasn't his first rodeo in India.
Oh, really?
No, not at all. He was actually the governor of Madras way back in 1803.
Wait. 1803, that's decades earlier. So he had previous experience on the subcontinent.
He did, but it was an experience that ended in what we might call a massive PR disaster. He was recalled, essentially fired and sent home in disgrace after the Vellore Mutiny of 1806.
Oh, right. We covered that in a previous deep dive. That was the mutiny sparked by the new dress code for the sepoys, wasn't it? The leather cockades and the ban on caste marks.
Precisely. Sir John Craddock, the commander-in-chief, introduced those changes, which were deeply, deeply offensive to both Hindu and Muslim sepoys. But Bentinck was the governor who approved them.
So he signed off on it.
He did. And when the sepoys revolted in Vellore, a bloody event where many British officers were killed, the blame fell squarely on the administration. The authorities in London felt he lacked the sensitivity to handle local customs and political nuances, so they yanked him back.
There is a serious irony there, then. The man who was recalled for causing a mutiny by being insensitive to local customs returns over 20 years later as the Governor-General to initiate an era of progress and social reform.
It's a huge paradox.
You'd think he'd be gun-shy about touching Indian traditions after getting fired for it once.
And that is the paradox of Bentinck, and it's what makes him such a compelling figure for historians. It's a redemption arc, really. When he returned in 1828, he was a different administrator. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was deeply influenced by the utilitarian philosophy that was gaining ground in England at the time.
Okay, let's pause there and double-click on that term, utilitarianism. We hear this term thrown around a lot in ethics papers and history books. Can we define this clearly for the listener? This is Jeremy Bentham's wheelhouse, right?
Correct. Jeremy Bentham and James Mill were the intellectual heavyweights behind this whole movement. The core idea is, on the surface, simple, but it's also radical. The greatest happiness of the greatest number.
Right, I've heard that phrase.
It sounds very mathematical, and it was intended to be. They believed that laws, governance, institutions, they shouldn't be judged by how old they are, or by tradition, or by what a religious text says. They should be judged solely on their utility.
Their practical use, in other words.
Exactly. Do they maximize happiness and minimize pain for the majority of the population? That's the only question that matters to a utilitarian.
So Bentinck comes back to India and applies this happiness calculus to his administration.
Precisely. He operated on the dictum that, and this is a quote, "the welfare of the subject peoples was the main, perhaps the primary duty of the British in India."
That sounds incredibly noble, almost humanitarian. But I assume there's a massive but coming. Because this is still colonial rule we were talking about.
The but is that this welfare was defined strictly, and I mean strictly, by British standards. It was a deeply paternalistic view. They believed they knew it was best for India, often disregarding centuries of tradition because those traditions just didn't fit the British utility calculation.
So they saw Indian society as something broken that they needed to fix.
Yes, stagnant and in need of a jolt of Western rationality. However, and this is a key point, compared to the blatant resource extraction of the earlier company years, where the goal was just to loot the treasury and ship wealth back to London, this was a significant philosophical shift. It set the stage for the Charter Act of 1833, which codified this new outlook.
So if the previous governors were robbers, Bentinck was like a strict schoolmaster. He thinks he's helping you, even if you hate the lesson.
That is a great analogy. And this schoolmaster approach dictated his foreign policy, too. We mentioned he wasn't a warmonger like Wellesley. His general policy regarding the Indian princely states is described as non-intervention and non-aggression.
But looking at the map, he did annex territories. I'm looking at the list here. Mysore, Kachar, Jaintia, Coorg. That doesn't exactly sound like non-intervention.
It doesn't, does it?
If I say I'm on a strict diet and then eat 4 pizzas, I'm not really on a diet.
Fair point, and that's where the nuance lies for a history student preparing for an exam. He didn't annex for expansion. He didn't wake up in the morning wanting to paint the map red for glory. He annexed or intervened based on what you could call moral policing, or to end what the British termed misgovernment.
So it was an intervention based on a pretext.
A pretext of improving administration, yes. It wasn't about land grabbing. It was about administrative stabilization, at least in their view.
Let's break these down because the specific cases matter for the exams. Let's start with Mysore. This happened in 1831. What went down there?
In Mysore, a peasant revolt broke out in 1830. The British assessment, which we should always take with a grain of salt, but it's what drove their decisions, was that this revolt was due to the ruler's misgovernance.
So blaming the local ruler for the unrest.
Entirely. The local administration had collapsed, the revenue wasn't coming in, there was chaos. So Bentinck stepped in and took over the administration of the state.
But he didn't annex it permanently, right? It wasn't like he wiped the state of Mysore off the map for good.
Correct, and this is a key distinction to make. The state was placed under British administration, run by British commissioners, but it was not annexed into British territory in the sense of extinguishing its sovereignty forever.
So the royal family was still technically there.
Yes, just sidelined. The state was later restored to the royal family many years later. The intervention was justified solely on the grounds of correcting the administration, not erasing the state. This distinguishes him from someone like Lord Dalhousie, who comes later and uses the doctrine of lapse to just grab everything he can. Bentinck was reluctant. He only moved when he felt he had to.
Okay, what about Kachar and Janitia? These seem like smaller players in the grand scheme, but they always appear in the notes.
They do, and they're good examples of his policy. Kachar, which was annexed in 1832, was a fairly standard case. The ruler died without an heir. It's a precursor to the doctrine of lapse, but less formalized, less aggressive. But Jaintia, that is a much more dramatic story.
I was reading the notes on this. Jaintia involves the goddess Kali in human sacrifice. That sounds like something out of an Indiana Jones movie.
It does, but it was a grim reality for the people involved. The ruler of Jaintia had abducted British subjects specifically to sacrifice them to the goddess Kali.
Wow. Okay, I can see why a British governor-general acting on utilitarian principles might draw a very firm red line there. You can't really have greatest happiness if people are getting abducted for sacrifice.
Exactly. For Bentinck, this was a cruel and abhorrent act. He annexed Jaintia not for the land, it wasn't particularly strategic or wealthy, but to avert the recurrence of such acts. It fits his profile of moral interventionism perfectly. He couldn't tolerate what he saw as barbarism happening right next door to British territory.
And then there's Coorg in 1834. The story of Viraraja. The sources describe him as a ruthless ruler.
Ruthless is putting it mildly. The British records, at least, state he treated his people with savage barbarity and had methodically killed off all of his male relatives to secure his position. It was a bloodbath in the palace.
Talk about a hostile work environment.
Indeed. And it reached a point where the people of Coorg actually appealed to the British for help. Bentinck sent a force under Colonel Lindsay to capture Mercara, the capital. Viraraja was deposed, and Coorg was annexed.
So again, the justification was humanitarian, at least on paper.
On paper, yes. If you are writing a maintenance answer about Bentinck's foreign policy, the key takeaway is that while he wasn't an expansionist like Wellesley, he was a strict interventionist whenever local rule violated British concepts of civilized governance.
So it's less, I want your land, and more, you're behaving badly, so I'm taking your keys away.
That is a perfect summary. And before we leave foreign policy, we absolutely must mention his relationship with Ranjit Singh, the Lion of Punjab. This wasn't annexation, this was high-level diplomacy.
The meeting at Rupar in 1831, I've seen paintings of this. It looked like a massive festival.
It was a grand spectacle. Elephants, gold, parades on the banks of the Sutlej River. But underneath all that pomp, there was hard business being done. The real substance was the Indus Navigation Treaty.
What did that do?
It opened the Sutlej River for trade. This just underscores Bentinck's primary focus: commerce, stability, and trade routes over war. He wanted the rivers open for business. He was always looking at the balance sheet.
Which brings us perfectly to the next section. We've talked about the map. Now we need to talk about the law books. Section 3 of our outline is the Charter Act of 1833.
Right.
This is a constitutional landmark.
It is huge, absolutely huge. To understand it, you have to remember the 20-year cycle. The East India Company's charter, their license to operate, basically, was renewed by the British Parliament in 1793, 1813, and now in 1833. And every 20 years, Parliament tightened the leash on the company just a little bit more.
And 1833 is when they really pull that leash tight. The first key provision is that the East India Company ceases to be a commercial agency.
Yes, think about the magnitude of that. The company that started as a group of merchants in the year 1600, whose entire purpose for 2 centuries was to buy cheap and sell dear, is now told, stop trading.
Just like that.
Just like that. No more tea, no more opium trade as a business entity. It is now purely a political agent acting on behalf of the crown.
So they're essentially middle management for the British government now. They are administrators, not merchants.
Precisely. The store is closed, the government office is open, and this centralization brings us to the second key provision, which is a favorite for objective-type questions in prelims. The Governor-General of Fort William becomes the Governor-General of India.
So Bentinck is the answer to that trivia question. Who was the first Governor-General of India?
He is, and the distinction matters. Warren Hastings was the first Governor-General of Bengal, or Fort William. Bentinck is the first Governor-General of India. The authority is now centralized in Calcutta. The governors of Bombay and Madras lost their legislative powers.
They couldn't make their own laws anymore.
Nope. They became subordinates. Bentinck was the boss. The buck stopped with him for the entirety of British India. It's a massive consolidation of power.
The act also added a new guy to the team. A law member was added to the council.
And this is where we meet a very famous or infamous figure, Thomas Babington Macaulay. He becomes the first law member.
We'll be hearing a lot more from him later, I'm sure.
We will. This appointment is the seed that eventually grows into the codification of Indian laws. The IPC, the Indian Penal Code, the CRPC, all the legal codes that India still uses today in some form. But the structural change happens here. The British realized they couldn't govern a subcontinent with a messy mix of Hindu law, Muslim law, and company regulations. They needed a unified, rationalized code.
And there's one more section in this act that sounds really progressive, almost ahead of its time, Section 87. It says, no native of India should be disabled from holding office by reason of religion, place of birth, descent, or color.
On paper, this is revolutionary. This is what we call the theoretical foundation of the Indianization of public services. On paper, it shattered the glass ceiling. It said an Indian could technically hold any job a Brit could. It sounds fantastic.
But let me guess, theoretical is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
It is doing all the lifting. In reality, the glass ceiling was made of reinforced concrete. It took a very, very long time for this to translate into actual high-level appointments for Indians. The directors of the company in London actually fought against this clause because they wanted to keep those juicy, high-paying jobs for their British nephews and cousins.
So it was a principle on paper, but not a practice in reality.
Not for a long time. But for a history student, it's important to note that the legal barrier was removed in 1833, even if the social and practical barrier remained firmly in place. It's a promise that would take almost a century to even begin to be fulfilled.
So Bentinck is changing the map, changing the Constitution, and now we need to talk about the money. Section 4 covers financial and administrative reforms.
And he had to talk about the money. When he took over in 1828, the company was completely broke. There was a deficit of 1 million rupees.
Which is a massive amount of money in 1828.
A fortune. The costly wars of the previous era, the First Anglo-Burmese War under Lord Amherst, the Maratha Wars before that, had drained the treasury dry. Bentinck had to play the role of the austere CFO. He was brought in to stop the bleeding.
And what did he do?
He started with austerity measures. He reduced salaries and allowances across the board for civil servants.
And this brings us to the infamous double Batta. What exactly was this?
Batta was a field allowance given to military troops when they were on active service. It was meant to cover the extra cost of food and living while out on a campaign.
This is reasonable.
It was, but over time it had become a standard perk, even when the troops were just sitting in peacetime garrisons far from any action. Double Batta was, well, double that amount, and it was being paid to officers stationed in places that were perfectly comfortable. It was basically free money for the officers. Bentinck abolished the double Batta system for garrisons not on immediate active duty.
I can imagine that made him popular at the barracks.
Oh, he was despised by the military for it. It was a very unpopular move among the British officers. There was practically a mutiny. They refused to dine with him. They wrote nasty letters back to London. But Bentinck stood firm. He didn't care about popularity. He cared about the deficit.
And did it work?
It worked brilliantly. He turned that 1 million rupee deficit into a surplus of 1.5 million rupees by the time he left office.
That is a serious turnaround from red to black in 7 years.
He also streamlined the courts, right?
He did. He abolished the provincial courts of appeal. These had been set up by Cornwallis years earlier, but they had become notoriously slow and expensive. They were just clogging up the entire system. They were basically just warehouses for pending cases. He decentralized the judiciary, giving more power and responsibility to local magistrates and judges.
And he changed the language of the courts. This is a detail I love because it touches real people.
It's a crucial detail. Before Bentinck, the official language of the higher courts was Persian.
A hangover from the Mughal era. Exactly, but think about the absurdity of it for a moment. You have a British judge who probably doesn't know Persian very well, and an Indian litigant who usually spoke Bengali or Tamil or Hindi and definitely didn't know Persian.
So the entire legal system was happening in a language neither side really understood.
Precisely. It was all mediated by interpreters who could be corrupt or incompetent. The potential for injustice was enormous.
So what did Bentinck do?
It was a very practical solution. He replaced Persian with the local vernacular languages in the lower courts and with English in the higher courts, like the Supreme Court.
So if I'm a regular farmer in Bengal, Suddenly, the proceedings in the lower court might actually be in a language I can understand.
That was the idea. It made justice slightly more accessible to the common person who didn't speak the elite court language of the Mughals. It was a major step towards modernizing the judicial interface.
And quickly, he also tackled revenue settlement in the Northwest Province.
Yes, this refers to the Macaulay system in that region, specifically the settlement process carried out under R.M. Byrd. It was a 30-year settlement which brought some stability to the revenue collection in that specific belt. It showed he wasn't just focused on Calcutta, he was looking at the agrarian base of the empire as well.
All right, we have covered the, let's say, the drier stuff, finance and admin. Now we get to the blockbuster section. Section 5, social reforms. This is the high-yield topic for anyone taking the exams. This is what Bentinck is famous for.
This is where Bentinck's legacy is truly cemented. This is where he stops being just an administrator and becomes a social reformer.
Let's start with the big one. The abolition of Sati in 1829. For those who don't know, Sati was the practice of burning a widow alive on her husband's funeral pyre.
And it was shockingly prevalent, particularly in Bengal. The sources mention one official report of 800 cases in a single year in the Bengal presidency alone. Bentinck was personally horrified by this. He called it an offense against natural justice.
But this was a huge risk, right? The British were terrified of interfering in religion. They thought it would cause a massive rebellion like 1857, but decades earlier.
A massive risk. His own advisors were split. Many told him to leave it alone, that it was a sacred custom, but he didn't do it in a vacuum. This wasn't just a white savior moment.
This is where Raja Rammohan Roy comes in.
This is a critical point for any exam answer.
Yeah.
You cannot talk about Bentinck's ban on Sati without talking about the tireless campaigning of Indian reformers like Raja Rammohan Roy. He was the one who created the environment where Bentinck could act.
What did he do exactly?
He published pamphlets, he debated Orthodox Hindu leaders, and most importantly, he went back to the ancient Sanskrit text and proved that Sati was not a mandatory or essential part of Hinduism. It was, he argued, a corrupt later practice. He gave Bentinck the theological cover and the moral support from within the Indian community that he desperately needed.
So with that backing, on December 4, 1829, we get Regulation 7.
Yes. Regulation 7 of 1829 declared Sati illegal and punishable as culpable homicide. Initially, it was just for the Bengal presidency, but in 1830 it was extended to Madras and Bombay as well.
Did everyone just accept it? Was there a backlash?
Oh, there was a huge backlash. The Orthodox Hindu community formed an organization called the Dharma Sabha and even sent a petition to the Privy Council in London to get the ban overturned. They argued it was a direct attack on their religion.
But the ban held.
The ban held. Bentinck and the Privy Council stood firm. This was a defining moment. The modern state asserting its right to protect the life of a woman over a religious custom.
And there's a direct PYQ linkage here, right?
A direct one. In the 2017 Mains General Studies Paper 1, Question 18 asked about the women's questions in the 19th century social reform movement. Bentinck's Regulation 7th, backed by Raja Rammohan Roy's activism, is the absolute primary evidence you would use to answer that question. It represents the state finally stepping into the domestic sphere to protect women.
From Sati to another dark chapter, the thugs.
The Thuggee cult. This is just fascinating stuff from a historical perspective. These were not common criminals. They were hereditary robbers and stranglers. They operated in gangs, sometimes 50 to 100 strong.
And they had a very specific method, right?
A very specific MO. They would pose as fellow travelers, befriend a group on the road, travel with them for days, eating with them, joking with them, and then at a prearranged signal, each thug would strangle a victim with a handkerchief or a sash and rob them.
And they were notorious for leaving no trace.
None. They buried the bodies so well that the victims just seemed to vanish off the face of the earth. They peaked during the anarchy after the Mughal Empire fell apart, when the highways were unsafe.
So Bentinck decides to tackle this. He appoints Captain William Sleeman, often called Thuggee Sleeman.
Thuggee Sleeman, a nickname that really sticks, and Sleeman was the perfect man for the job. He was methodical, patient, and ruthless.
How did he even begin to catch them? You can't just patrol every road and jungle in central India.
You can't. So Sleeman basically invented modern criminal profiling and the approver system. He realized this wasn't random crime, it was an organized network. He would catch a thug and offer him a deal, a lighter sentence, like life imprisonment instead of hanging, if he ratted out his confederates.
So he turned them against each other.
Exactly. He built this massive, intricate map of the thug networks, essentially a family tree of crime, detailing their rituals, their secret language, everything. Starting in 1830, they launched a systematic campaign. Over 5 years, they captured over 2,000 thugs.
And what happened to them?
Many were executed, but a large number were transported for life to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The significance of this was huge. It consolidated the British claim that they were the providers of law and order. They made the highways safe again. For the common traveler, for the merchant, this was a massive improvement in quality of life. The Pact Britannica became a tangible reality on the roads.
His reformist agenda didn't stop there. We also have the issue of female infanticide.
Yes, a tragically common practice in parts of Rajputana, Punjab, Malwa, and Kutch. The killing of female infants, often due to the crushing social and financial pressure of dowry. Bentinck officially prohibited it and declared it a punishable crime.
It's one thing to declare it a crime, but was it effective?
It was a start. It's a practice that's very hard to police, happening in private, but making it a crime and putting state pressure on local rulers to enforce the ban was the first major step. He also stopped the ritual child sacrifices that were happening at Sugar Island in Bengal.
It really paints a picture of a man driven by a very specific and very British moral compass. He was not afraid to legislate morality.
He absolutely wasn't, which brings us to his most long-lasting legacy, perhaps even more so than the Sati ban. Section 6. Educational reforms. This, as you said earlier, changed the software of India.
The great debate, Orientalists versus Anglicists.
This had been brewing for a while. The Charter Act of 1813 had actually set aside 1 lakh rupees for education, a decent sum back then, but the money wasn't spent for years because nobody could agree on how to spend it.
What were the two sides of the argument?
On one side, you had the Orientalists. They wanted to stick to traditional Indian learning Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, and use the vernacular languages for instruction. They respected the ancient texts and believed the British should encourage the existing culture. People like H.T. Prinsep argued that to govern India well, you must understand and support its traditions.
And the other side?
The other side were the Anglicists. They believed that was a complete waste of time. They wanted to teach Western science, Western literature, and they wanted to do it exclusively using the English language. They saw traditional Indian learning as backward and unscientific.
And who breaks the tie in this debate? Our friend Macaulay again.
Lord Macaulay, the law member, writes his famous Minute on Education in 1835. It is one of the most powerful and controversial texts in Indian history.
I have the quote here. It's infamous. He said, "A single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia."
It just captures the sheer colonial arrogance of the time. It dismisses thousands of years of Sanskrit and Persian scholarship in one sentence. But it also captures a very clear strategic vision. Macaulay wasn't just being insulting. He had a plan.
What was the plan?
He wanted to create, and this is his own phrase, a class of persons Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect.
He wanted to create a buffer class, a group of English-speaking Indians who could serve as middlemen between the British rulers and the millions of Indian subjects.
Exactly. This is the famous downward filtration theory. You educate the small elite class in English, and you hope that modern Western ideas will eventually filter down from them to the masses. Bentinck wholeheartedly accepted Macaulay's proposal. The resolution of March 7, 1835 made English the official and literary language of India. Government funds would now be used only for English education.
And in the same year, 1835, he lays the foundation of the Calcutta Medical College.
That's a very concrete signal of the shift. It's the move to Western science. Before this, medical teaching was based on Ayurveda or Unani systems. This new college was about modern anatomy, surgery, Western medicine. But think about the long-term impact of this entire educational shift. This single decision determined the intellectual makeup of the Indian leadership for the next century.
The very people who would eventually fight for India's independence.
The very same. Gandhi, Nehru, Jinnah, Ambedkar, they were all products of this English legal and educational system. They used the master's tools to dismantle the master's house.
Talk about unintended consequences. They built the classroom where the students learned how to rebel.
Precisely. They taught them about Magna Carta, the French Revolution, and the concepts of liberty and democracy. And eventually, the educated Indians turned around and said, hey, this is great stuff. Why doesn't this apply to us?
Before we wrap up, let's look at Section 7, the PYQ linkage. We've touched on a few, but let's consolidate for the students listening.
Sure. As we mentioned, the 2017 mains question on women's issues is a direct hit for Regulation XII and the abolition of Sati. There was also a question in the 2020 prelims, I think it was Q34 in the source PDF, about Fort William College.
How does that connect to Bentinck?
Well, Fort William College was established by Wellesley much earlier, and it was a hub for Orientalist learning training civil servants in vernacular languages and local customs. But under Bentinck and the Anglicist shift we just discussed, the focus moves away from that Orientalist approach toward the English-based system. So, understanding Bentinck's era helps you contextualize the decline of institutions like Fort William College and eliminate wrong options in such questions.
And for the objective type, rapid-fire facts that a student must have at their fingertips.
Okay, 4 key takeaways for prelims. Number 1, first Governor General of India, Bentinck. Number 2, abolish Sati, Bentinck in 1829. Number 3, suppress the thugs, that was William Sleeman under Bentinck. And number 4, introduction of English education, that was Macaulay's minute, accepted by Bentinck in 1835.
Perfect. If you have those 4 pegged, you are safe for most basic questions on his tenure. So, let's try and summarize the man.
Bentinck was a straightforward, honest, benevolent administrator. There's a famous line by a historian that says he acted where others had talked. He cleaned up the balance sheet, he modernized the courts, he humanized society by banning Sati and Thuggee, and he anglicized education.
Seems like he paved the way for the modern Indian state, administratively unified, educated in English, and legally codified.
He absolutely did. But here is a final provocative thought to leave you with. Bentinck's entire project was to westernize India in order to civilize it, according to his utilitarian views. He thought he was strengthening the British hold by creating this class of loyal English-speaking Indians. But by introducing English and the Western concepts of liberty, rights, and nationalism that came with it, did he inadvertently hand Indians the very tools they would use to dismantle the British Empire 100 years later? The Indian National Congress, founded later in the century, was essentially a gathering of Macaulay's minute graduates.
That is a fascinating what-if. He planted the seeds of the empire's destruction by trying to improve it.
Exactly. History is full of such ironies. The road to decolonization was paved with British intentions.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive. If you found this helpful for your prep, and we really hope you did, please hit that subscribe button on Simplified UPSC by PPP. It really does make a difference.
It helps us reach more people who can benefit from this.
It really does. And a huge thank you again to our Patreon supporters. You make this all possible. If you are in a position to, please consider supporting us there.
We appreciate every single one of you.
We do. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment with your biggest takeaway, and share it with a friend who might find it useful.
Let us know what you think.
And remember, for the free notes and those crucial PYQs, check the Telegram link in the description. And for the serious aspirants, DM us on Telegram to join the private library. You get the premium notes, the model mains answers, and the full organized video series.
It's a fantastic resource.
It is. Until next time, keep learning.